It is your risk appetite. What is your ability, and when I say risk appetite, is how much risk are you willing to take?
Yeah.
So that is what defines kind of how much you want to invest in the fund. As a general rule of thumb, for your cash and liquid investments, you should have somewhere between 2 and 3 months' salary set aside in cash. Anything beyond that should be going into your savings or into investments. So I think one of the things that is lost is when people are looking at making investments, they are only thinking about one investment at a time. They're not thinking about broadly how you want to make your investment. What is your goal? The most important question when you start out is, what is it you're trying to achieve? Are you trying to save for your retirement, which is very long term? Or are you trying to save for buying a motorbike, which could be much shorter term? Are you trying to save for your child's education, which is once again medium to long term? So that goal, understanding that goal, and quite honestly, you will have different goals depending on where you are in your own lifestyle.
So how long should one invest in the funds for the best returns?
See, similar to the appropriate amount of money, there's no real and good answer for how long one should invest. There is no, in theory, and this has actually been proven out even in the actual returns that you've calculated, the longer you invest, the better your returns will be. Now, that is not to say that if you do a short-term trade and you get lucky, you can't have a good return. You could, but that's key is that that is lucky. That is not investing. So if you want to invest, it must be for the long term. But like I mentioned earlier, it has to go hand in hand with your goal. You have to ask yourself, what is your financial goal? So in our previous example, motorbike once again is a short-term goal. Whereas if I'm saving for my retirement, it's a long-term goal. So if I'm saving and investing for the long term, I want to be able to hold on to the long term. Now, as investors, at VCBF, we are long-term investors. We look at the long term when we're looking at any company before we make an investment. We're not looking at how this company is going to do in 6 months, how they're going to do in 9 months, 12 months. What we're looking at is how is this company going to do in 3, 5, 10 years. So if we find the right kind of company, we would rather own that kind of company for the long term. So what we want our investors to do is also think about investing for the long term.
What are the targeted returns of VCBF Tactical Balance Funds?
VCBF Tactical Balance Fund uses a benchmark that is based on 50% of the returns of the VN index and 50% of the returns from the 10-year government bond. What we're looking to do is not necessarily worry about what the benchmark returns are. What we're trying to do is find good investments that will do well for the long term. Now, we need a benchmark because at the end of the day, the investors have to be able to look at it and say, okay, how did you do against your benchmark? So we need to have that benchmark. But what we're focused on is looking for good investments that are going to do well over the long term. So even when you're looking at that comparison, it has to be over the long term. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend looking at something saying, okay, how did you do on this month? Or how did you do in over 6 months? You have to look at that over how do you do that over multiple years.
So does VCBF introduce any special investment tool or friendly dividend investment to have investors here in Vietnam to invest efficiently?
I'd say in terms of any tools or unique investment tools that are available, I'd say one of the concepts that we have introduced is systematic investment plan. And for short, that's SIP, S-I-P. What that means is, when I talked about earlier, investing regularly and consistently. This is a plan that we're essentially putting in place to make it easier for investors to invest on a regular basis. And the idea is you set aside a fixed amount of money that goes into the fund every month. And the idea being that you want to slowly build up your investment portfolio. And you may or may not have the ability to put in a big amount of money, but that's not important. What is important is you put in a small amount every month. So I think having that concept, and that's one of the concepts that we're introducing, and to help investors with that regular savings, it's almost you have to form a habit. So when you form that habit of regularly saving, that's essentially what we're looking for to develop and create with the investor base. One of the key benefits of doing that is you have that concept of compounding. Like I mentioned earlier, when you invest 5 million dong plus the million dong within 5 years, if you had just saved that amount, it would be 65 million. But because it's also being invested at a certain rate of return, you get that compounding because your money is earning something each month that it's there. So every month that you're not investing or you're not saving, you're not earning something on your money. And that is a concept you want to change. And the other thing is the dong cost averaging. I mean, the best thing, like if you're looking at investing a fixed amount, if, for example, you invested 1,000 dong and the NAV in the fund is 100 dong, you would have 10 units that you bought this month. Next month, you're still investing 1,000 dong, but the NAV in the fund is now 50 dong. So what would you be investing then? You would be buying 200 units. So you're doing two things at the same time. You're buying more units when it has gotten cheaper, which is an incredibly good thing for the long term. Because eventually that NAV will get back up and you will have bought more units at a lower price. So as it recovers, you have the benefit then of not only having more units, but having a higher NAV as well.
So when the net asset value of the fund goes down lower than the purchase price, so should investor buy more or to sell certificates?
I think when the price goes down, you have to be focused on a number of things. You have to understand why. It's the same concept as investors, as analysts and as portfolio managers. When we're looking at a company's price in the market and it goes down, our first question is, why is it going down? If we have done our research well and we like the company, then if it goes down, my natural reaction is we must buy more of it. I think it's the same way. You have to think about it the same way, and it has to be based on your investment horizon. It has to be based on your financial goals. So if you have a longer term goal, then the markets are extremely volatile. They're going to be up, they're going to be down. If you're going to try and trade on that, it's going to be impossible to do it. You might get lucky every once in a while where you sold it and then it goes down, or you buy it and then it goes up. But to be able to do that consistently, it is impossible to do. So my sense is, and what my recommendation would be, is that if nothing has changed, if nothing drastically has changed, then you should be buying more. Now, if you are investing through our SIP plan, you will automatically do that, even without having to do anything on your part. Because like I gave you the example earlier, when the NAV goes down, you automatically are buying more units. So you are indirectly investing more. I mean, I'd like to give a quote here that Sir John Templeton used to use very often. And that is, the time of maximum pessimism is the best time to buy. And the time of maximum optimism is the best time to sell.
So thank you, Arvinas, for sharing your experience in managing open-ended funds in our program today. And I hope that your new fund in Vietnam will work well with our young population.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on the show itself.
Thưa quý vị, một hình thức đầu tư mới nào cũng mang lại nhiều cơ hội cũng như nhiều rủi ro. Và tôi xin kính chúc quý vị lựa chọn được cho mình một quỹ đầu tư đáng tin cậy và nhiều kinh nghiệm để quý vị có thể gửi gắm những khoản đầu tư của mình trong năm mới. Xin cảm ơn quý vị đã quan tâm theo dõi chương trình. Hẹn gặp lại quý vị trong các chương trình sau.